Hello and welcome back to StoryTime with Eric Zimmer. We've covered Albert Herter, we've covered Ferdinand Horvath, and we've covered Gustav Tenggren. Now here's the fourth and final concept artist from the golden age of Disney's art, the 1930s. Bianca Majolie. So you ready? Alright, let's begin. Bianca Majolie. If you can do so without causing yourself too much inconvenience, please arrange to see me sometime. I am only 5 feet tall and don't bite. Bianca Majolie to Walt Disney. On February 23rd, 1940, just 2 weeks after the opening of Pinocchio, the following appeared in the Hollywood Citizen News. It is no longer news when a woman takes her place in a man's workaday world, but it was news when a woman artist invaded the strictly masculine stronghold of the Walt Disney Studio. The event took place about 5 years ago. Until that time, the only girls in the studio were the few necessary secretaries and the girls who did the inking and painting of celluloids. Well, at the time, there were over 150 women employed in the ink and paint department. The girl who caused all the excitement was a young artist who, as a child, had gone to school with Walt in Chicago. Bianca Majolie was indeed the first woman to join Disney's story department. Paving the way for others was a rough undertaking, but she would soon be followed by a handful of similarly remarkable women. Walt's friend. I was born in Rome, Italy, on September 13th, 1900, explained Bianca in a letter to animation historian John K. Maker. My Italian name was Bianca Majolie, and my French teacher, Josephine Mack at McKinley, changed it to Blanche Majolie. It was Walt who later changed my name to Bianca. Walt Disney was a lower classmate of mine at McKinley High School in Chicago in 1917. I did not know him or his friends personally, and saw him only once on the day he came back to school dressed in his GI uniform at the end of World War I to say goodbye. I was graduating at midterm, handed him my Girl Grad book, and he drew pictures in it. 17 years after high school, Bianca was working in New York City as art director and brochure designer for the J.C. Penney Company. She had studied composition, anatomy, and painting at the Art Institute of Chicago, drawing at the Leonardo da Vinci School of Art in New York, and clay sculpture at the Art Students League in New York. In 1929, she had worked as a freelance artist for Earnshaw Publications, tackling fashion assignments which took her to Rome, Florence, and Paris. On April 1st, 1934, after 5 years with J.C. Penney, she decided to send a faithful letter to the man she still remembered as a teenager. Dear Walt Disney, it cannot be 17 years ago, and yet it is, since the days of McKinley High School. It seems to me that somewhere I've a grad book full of little things you drew, and it seems to me that you are a rather sweet fair-haired lad of 14, quite eager to do nice things for people. During these years you have done so many great things, while I have remained quite humble. At any rate, you surely do not remember me in the least. Being rather a bad artist, I've had a hand at all sorts of art and have spent the last 3 years being an art director for a department store chain. If you can do so without causing yourself too much inconvenience, please arrange to see me sometime. I am only 5 feet tall and don't bite. I have a pantomime cartoon strip that I'd like very much to market, and you might be able to give me some information since my knowledge of the comic strip market is very limited indeed. Walt received the letter on April 11th, and answered it just 3 days later. Dear friend Blanche, I remember with great interest the year I spent at McKinley Heights. I also remember a very charming little girl with black eyes and black hair and a sweet personality whom I believe was art editor of the McKinley Voice. I am sorry you don't bite, but nevertheless I should be very glad to have you drop in and see me any time at your convenience. But due to the fact that I am located in Hollywood, I am afraid that it would be quite a trip. So I might suggest that you send me by mail some of the comic strips that you speak of, and I shall be glad to give you any information I may have regarding the comic strip market. I am very sorry we are so widely separated and that I shall not be able to see you personally, but I would like to extend my very best wishes to you for your success. On April 25th, Bianca wrote back. The content of the letter betrays the artistic sensibility that, a few years later, would permeate her art at Disney and would leave her so emotionally exposed. You are sweet to remember the child that I was. Yes, and remarkable too, since I am sure you only saw her a very few times. As I recall, she was much like your small mouse person, without any of his charm and merriment. Her chief delight was seeing Miss Sargent emerge with her traditional tray of books, usually topped by a solitary flower. What a charming little old woman she was, do you recall? With her beautifully groomed hair, her gowns of gray taffeta, her exquisite lace necklace, and the tiny jeweled watch pinned to her bosom. She might have been the good fairy in a flowery old-fashioned romance, or she might have been created expressly for the purpose of living in a dollhouse. I am sending you photostats of some of my cartoon strips. They are from pencil drawings, and I dare say you will see much room for improvement. I do not want to spend too much time on them because I did not want to spend too much time on them because I did not know if the idea would take. True to style, Walt's response was very honest and direct. I have received the sample strips. I have looked them over, and I believe they contain some very cute and clever ideas, but at the same time I do not feel they are done up in quite a professional style. However, on the strength of the ideas alone, I have taken the liberty of writing to my friend Mr. J.V. Connolly of King Feature Syndicate, asking him to look over the strips and give them consideration, and if possible to give you an interview. From comic strips to story drawings. By June 1934, thanks to Walt, Bianca was in touch with Joseph V. Connolly, head of the sales, promotion, publicity, and advertising of King's Feature Syndicate, and the man who had first contacted the Disney studio in 1929 to suggest the launch of a Mickey Mouse comic strip. Connolly expressed some interest in Bianca's strip, but they did not strike a deal. We were in the middle of the Great Depression, remembered Bianca, and my strip was about a girl named Stella who was trying to find a job. There was always a little twist at the end, and she just didn't make it. And neither did my cartoon strip, because another strip named Benny won first place. I was thinking of taking a trip to the Orient when I thought of Walt and his L.A. cartoon studio, so I wrote him a letter on February 11th, 1935, and he replied. From that point on, things started moving fast. Around February 13th, Walt and Bianca had lunch together at the Tam O'Shanter, one of Walt's favorite restaurants in L.A., and she showed him her portfolio. Walt offered her a position at the studio on the spot. In a letter dated Thursday, February 14th, Bianca sent her decision. My dear Walt, you cannot imagine how much I enjoyed my short visit with you, and how really delightful it was to recapture a bit of my girlhood there beneath the shade of Tam O'Shanter's wooden umbrella. You are everything and much more than I visualized, and the really amazing thing is that you haven't changed in spite of the terrifying eyebrow uplift that succeeds only in arousing my merriment. This morning I had some encouraging replies from 2 of the stores, but in the interim I have definitely decided to take you up on your very generous offer of a 6 months apprenticeship in your story department. If I did not appear enthusiastic, it was simply because it was a little hard to visualize the transition of working for dollars into working for love. I really do appreciate the opportunity you are placing before me, and sincerely hope that I may have something to contribute to your studio. Perhaps after you have found a small corner for me, you will let me know when I am to come. Imagine my amazement at finding out that I was being driven home in your car by none other than the voice of Donald Duck. Bianca was hired by Disney just 4 days later with an initial salary of $18 a week, much lower than Horvath's $75 or Herder's $85. Majolie was indeed working for love rather than for money. She had just joined Walt's most cherished purview, the heart of the Disney studio, the very masculine story department. Disney's first female story artist. In 1935, the studio's atmosphere was crammed and clammy, recalled Bianca. We worked in close quarters in an L-shaped old building with a front parking lot. My close co-workers were gagman Roy Williams, who later became the Big Musketeer in the Mickey Mouse Club, and Walt Kelly, future author of the comic strip Pogo. Being the only woman in the group, I did not enjoy the story conferences, which called for action contributions of slapstick comedy gags, and avoided them whenever possible. Bianca's first major artistic contribution to the studio was her original idea for the story of Elmer Elephant, a short released in March of 1936, whose central theme was inspired by her own difficulties to fit in. Walt really valued Bianca's creativity and talent, but despite his support, she had a hard time adapting to her new entirely male environment. According to historian John Canemaker, she was like a Dresden doll thrown into a monkey cage. The story sessions in which the story artists had to present their ideas in front of Walt were by far the most challenging aspect of life in the story department. Gags, story points, or whole sequences were often discarded to strengthen the final reels. Artists often had to swallow their egos and go back to drafting board after having spent weeks and sometimes months developing a story. This pressure seemed particularly intense for Bianca, as she had to deal with the change in dynamics her presence represented, along with the notes and criticism. Disney's Story Women. Bianca was the first woman hired in the story department, but she wasn't alone for long. A few key women soon joined her at the studio, though even Walt had a hard time completely trusting that they would fit in. Walt valued talent tremendously, but even during his interview with the next woman to join, Grace Huntington, in March of 1936, he expressed his reluctance to hire women in story. In his mind, there were some rational reasons, typical of the era, which Grace recounted in her autobiography, Please Let Me Fly. In the first place, he told me, it takes years to train a good storyman. Then if the storyman turns out to be a story girl, the chances are 10 to 1 that she will marry and leave the studio high and dry with all the money that had been spent on her training gone to waste, as there will be nothing to show for it. Grace also remembered that Walt explained that he had women as inkers, painters, and stenographers, but that their training period was relatively short. He would never consider hiring a woman as an animator because when she married, she would be a total loss to the studio. However, if a girl could write, she could work at home after she married, and her ideas might still be used by the studio. Thankfully, Walt's views, unlike those of his contemporaries, would evolve quickly on the subject.